This Christmas, my own father did something so unbelievably cruel, it fractured my family forever. He publicly shamed my 8-year-old daughter, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. What happened next not only exposed a painful family truth, but changed everything. Hey viewers, subscribe to my channel, and let's get back to the story. Christmas morning. It's supposed to be magic, right? The smell of pine and cinnamon, the joyful chaos of wrapping paper, the squeals of kids discovering gifts they didn't even know they wanted. Most of all, it's supposed to feel safe. But that morning, it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. I stood there in my parents' living room, a forgotten mug growing cold in my hand, watching my daughter. She was 8, vibrant, sitting cross-legged on the rug, her hair a beautiful mess from sleep. Her cheeks were flushed with pure, unadulterated excitement, and she was wearing the bright red sweater she'd insisted was her lucky Christmas sweater weeks ago. Her eyes kept darting to my dad, waiting, because he loved being the center of attention. Christmas was his ultimate stage. He cleared his throat with a theatrical flourish, tapped a spoon against his mug, and flashed that self-satisfied smirk he always wore when he thought he was about to be brilliant. "I have one last gift," he boomed. The room went silent. My daughter sat up even straighter, her small body buzzing with anticipation. "For my granddaughter," he announced, reaching under the coffee table. A sudden, sharp dread tightened my chest. He pulled out a piece of paper, thick, glossy, laminated, and held it up like a trophy. "A little award," he chuckled. A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. He handed it to her. She took it so carefully, like it was made of glass. She looked down, and in an instant, her bright, innocent smile just vanished. The words were printed in bold, tacky letters, framed by cheap gold stars. "Least pretty granddaughter." For a horrifying second, the entire world stopped. My daughter didn't cry. That was the absolute worst part. She just stared at it, blinking, as if her beautiful, intelligent mind was trying to comprehend something utterly senseless, something that simply didn't belong in her world. Someone actually snickered. Another person mumbled, "Oh, come on. It's just a joke." My father leaned back, his face etched with smug satisfaction. "Builds character," he scoffed. Then, my daughter's tiny voice, barely a whisper, pierced through the silence. "Daddy?" she asked, her eyes still fixed on the certificate. Did I do something wrong?" That was it. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a violent shriek as I shot to my feet. 3 strides, and I was there. I snatched the certificate from her trembling hands and ripped it in half. Then again, and again. The sharp, ugly sound of tearing plastic was deafening. I threw the tattered pieces onto the coffee table. "Get out!" I screamed at my father, my voice raw with a fury I didn't know I possessed. The room exploded. My mother gasped, "Don't you dare speak to him like that. You humiliated my child." I roared back. He just scoffed again. "On Christmas? For entertainment? She needs thicker skin." I ignored him, turning to my daughter. I knelt, cupping her face in my hands. Her eyes, still wide with confusion, were starting to well up. "You are beautiful," I said, my voice loud and clear for every single person in that room to hear. "You're kind, you're smart, and nothing he says ever gets to decide your worth. Ever." And then, finally, her eyes overflowed, not from shame, but from a flood of relief. Behind me, my father's voice, cold and dismissive. "You're overreacting. Kids need to learn their place." That sentence, that one sentence, lit something ancient and furious inside me. "You don't get a place in her life anymore," I said, standing up to face him. "Not if this is how you treat her." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from the corner, a voice. My grandfather, 87 years old, usually quiet, observant. "Sit down," he said to my father. My father actually laughed. "Stay out of it, old man." My grandpa, leaning heavily on his cane, slowly pushed himself to his feet. "I won't," he said, his voice calm, but with an iron will I'd never heard before. "Not anymore." Everyone froze. He walked, slowly and deliberately, towards my daughter. He knelt, despite the obvious pain it caused him, and looked her directly in the eyes. "You know why you're special?" he asked her so gently. She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Because you are brave," he said, "and because you remind me of someone who mattered very much." My father stiffened. My own pulse spiked. My grandpa turned to me, his eyes softening. "Take her to the kitchen," he said, barely a whisper. "She doesn't need to hear what comes next." I hesitated, but then I understood. I took her hand. As we walked away, I heard my mother's panicked voice. "What are you doing?" And my grandpa's reply, steady and sharp, "I'm telling the truth." In the kitchen, my daughter sat at the table, swinging her legs. "Am I really ugly?" she asked quietly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "No," I said, "and anyone who says that is broken inside." She nodded slowly, processing. "Grandpa looked mad," she observed. "Yes," I replied, "but sometimes being mad means you're protecting something important." She reached for my hand. "Don't let them be mean anymore," she whispered. I squeezed her fingers. "I won't." From the living room, voices began to rise. Arguments, shouting. Then, a heavy, suffocating silence. My mother stormed into the kitchen, her eyes wild. "You've ruined Christmas," she hissed. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "You did that when you let him hurt her." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You think you're better than us now?" "I think my daughter deserves better," I countered. She stormed out. A few minutes later, my grandpa entered. He looked utterly exhausted, but also oddly relieved and profoundly sad. "It's done," he said. "What's done?" I asked, my heart hammering in my chest. He looked at my daughter, then back at me. "Things that should have been said decades ago," he replied. I knew, deep down, that whatever he'd revealed had changed everything. It already had. By the way, if you're still with me, still feeling the tension of this Christmas catastrophe, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because trust me, there are more unbelievable stories coming. I thought the worst part was over that morning, but what my grandpa revealed next would unravel our family in ways none of us were prepared for. The living room didn't sound the same when we walked back in. It was quieter, but not the calm kind of quiet. More like the air had been punched out of it. My father was sitting rigidly on the couch, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching in his cheek. My mother stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, staring at the floor as if she wished it would swallow her whole. No one spoke as we entered. My grandpa was still standing, a rare sight these days, which alone told me how serious this was. "I'm going to say this once," he began, his voice low, but steady as a rock. "And after today, I'm done protecting lies." My father scoffed. "You're being dramatic." My grandpa turned to him slowly, his gaze unwavering. "You called your granddaughter least pretty," he stated, every word heavy with accusation. "On Christmas, after everything." That wiped the smirk right off my father's face. "You think this is about a joke?" my grandpa continued. "This is about a pattern." My stomach dropped. He then turned to the rest of the room. My aunts, uncles, cousins, all those people who had watched my daughter's face crumble and said absolutely nothing. "You all saw it," he said, his voice tinged with disappointment. "And you stayed quiet, just like you did before." My mother finally looked up, her eyes wide. "Before what?" My grandpa exhaled slowly, as if releasing a breath he'd been holding for 50 years. "Before you decided some children were worth more than others." The room froze solid. My heart hammered against my ribs, echoing in my ears. My father stood up abruptly. "Stop." "No," my grandpa said firmly. "You don't get to stop this." He turned to me, his gaze softening slightly. "Do you want to know the truth?" he asked gently. I nodded, though my hands were shaking. "You were never the problem," he said. "Neither was your daughter." My mother's face drained of all color. My father's voice rose. "You're confusing things. I'm clarifying them," my grandpa replied. He leaned on his cane, a weary but determined warrior. "When you were a child," he said, addressing me directly, "you were quieter than your siblings. You didn't demand attention. You didn't perform. And because of that, you were overlooked." My throat tightened, a sudden ache swelling within me. "You learned early to make yourself small," he continued, "to earn love by being useful, by not causing trouble." Every single memory hit me at once. Being asked to give up my seat, being told to share my gifts, being praised only when I was being helpful. "And now," he said, gesturing towards my daughter, "you're doing the same thing to her." My father exploded. "That's not true." "You laughed." My grandpa shot back, his voice rising in power. "You humiliated her, and you felt entitled to it." My mother stepped forward, her voice a plea. "We didn't mean dash. You meant exactly what you did." My grandpa interrupted quietly. "Because you've always done it." Silence fell again. This time it felt utterly final. My daughter squeezed my hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "can we go home?" "Yes," I said instantly, my voice cracking. But my grandpa stopped me. "Wait," he said. "There's one more thing." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. My father's eyes widened in horror. "No," he breathed. "You can't." "I already did." my grandpa replied. He handed the envelope to me. Inside was a copy of his updated will. My name was there. So was my daughter's. My father's was not. Neither was my mother's. I changed it this morning, my grandpa said, because legacy isn't blood. It's behavior. My mother gasped, a broken sound. You're punishing us. No, he countered, his gaze firm. I'm protecting her. He looked at my daughter and smiled softly. You deserve better, he told her. She smiled back, a small, genuine flicker of light. That moment broke something in my father. You're tearing this family apart, he shouted, his face contorted. My grandpa just shook his head. No, he said, his voice suddenly full of old, deep sadness. You did that a long time ago. I just stopped pretending it was okay. We left shortly after. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Outside, the cold air hit my face, sharp and clean, a welcome shock. My daughter wrapped her arms around my waist. I don't like Grandpa anymore, she said quietly. I knelt down to her level. That's okay, I told her. You don't have to like people who hurt you. She nodded, thinking. Great-grandpa likes me, she said, a small hopeful note in her voice. Yes, I smiled, he does. Months passed. We didn't hear from my parents. Not once. No apologies, no explanations. And that, in itself, was enough of an answer. My grandpa visited often. He taught my daughter chess, let her win sometimes, and told her stories about mistakes he wished he'd fixed sooner. One afternoon, she asked him, "Why did you wait so long?" He looked at me, a profound sadness in his eyes, before answering. Because sometimes people don't realize silence is also a choice. One evening, months after that Christmas, my daughter crawled into my lap and said something I'll never, ever forget. Daddy, she said softly, her head on my chest. I'm glad they don't come anymore. I froze. Why? I asked, my heart catching in my throat. Because my heart feels lighter, she said. That was when I knew. Walking away hadn't damaged her. Staying, enduring that toxic behavior, that would have. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, even when it broke your heart? Or witness something like this happen? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to hear your stories and your perspective.